Hi, my name's Dr. Bryce Dyer, and the team at SUPboarder Mag have asked if I'd share with you just some pre-race season tips and tricks to try and speed up your performance through tweaking your equipment and making simple changes that don't cost a lot of money. Now, the way I like to look at these kind of situations is that if something isn't actually speeding you up, it's basically slowing you down, and the main thing that's slowing you down is drag. And there's two different kinds of drag, hydrodynamic drag, that are acting on you. The first one is skin drag. Now, skin drag is effectively the friction caused between the water, the fluid that's flowing around your board, and the surface of the board itself, so the surface textures. And nature deals with this with things like sharks and things by changing the textures of its skin. What you can do is basically give your board a good clean. America's Cup yachts, for example, apply special chemicals to reduce this friction, but the cheapest way for you guys to do it is basically to get some soapy water and give the board a good clean pre-race. It reduces the friction, gets rid of all the contaminants that build up in the dirt that will slow your board down, but also what it will do is stop taking bacteria from one source of water to another, so it's good for the environment as well. Next thing is the form drag. Now, once you've chosen a board that suits your needs, your stability that you're after, there's not actually a lot you can do to change the shape. But what you can do is change the way it sits in the water. And the way to do that is the subject of weight, which is a difficult subject in the sporting sense. I don't mean diets. Athletes don't diet, they eat for performance, but actually losing a couple of kilos off of you actually is a lot cheaper than possibly losing a couple of kilos off your board by buying a new board. If you look at some ranges, some brands that are out there, the difference between their top of the range model and a lower range model with a simpler construction might only be 1.5 kilos, 2 kilos. You can possibly save that just by making healthier eating choices and getting the weight off here and not out of your wallet, basically. Other thing you can do, look at clothing. One of the things you find is that clothing is actually quite absorbent, and SUP is plagued a bit by fashion and history, so we have a tendency to use things like board shorts and cotton t-shirts. They're the worst thing you can race with, and the reason is they absorb water and hang on to it. Modern textures shed it. They can be aquaphobic or hydrophobic, whereby the water will splash onto them and run straight off immediately, or the water's designed to evaporate quite quickly. Cotton t-shirts and board shorts are the worst thing you can wear. They'll absorb water, they'll hang on to it, they won't dry, and that adds more weight onto the board. And actually, if you get some of your clothing, like board shorts, actually get it soaking wet and actually weigh it on scales, you'll be amazed how much it can actually weigh. So looking at that is quite important. And why is weight important? Well, the reason is we don't actually paddle at a constant speed. If you look at your board in terms of acceleration, as you apply the catch, the board begins to accelerate, and then as you come through your stroke and then remove it from the water and go through recovery phase, the board begins to slow down. So what you actually find is, although you might think you're holding an average speed, your actual speed is doing this all the time, accelerating and de-accelerating. That acceleration requires energy, your paddling energy. And the heavier you are, the more energy it costs to accelerate it. So saving the weight saves energy, will make you go further, for longer, for less effort. And that's why weight in SUP is so critically important. The next thing to do is sometimes you find that the board is fine when you train, but when you get in a race with 30, 40 other people around you, it might not have the stability that you're looking for. It's easy to look at losing the board, but actually what you might want to do is actually think about changing fins. So for example, using a fin with a little bit more surface area actually increases the stability. If you go for a longer fin, it can actually stop the board rolling quite so much. If you use a fin that is slid further backwards, it will actually stop the board yawing, so moving from left to right quite so much. Sometimes our technique has a habit of breaking down when we're under race pressure, so playing with your fins is a much cheaper prospect sometimes than actually buying a new board. And you can do the same thing with your paddles as well. Using bigger and smaller paddles shouldn't only be matched to your paddling style or your physiology, but it also changes the behaviour of the board. And sometimes you find a narrow board will behave a little bit better if you oversize paddle a little bit. But all of this stuff needs to be trained with. And the last point really of this is really about practice, and simulation is everything. Knowing your event. If you're setting yourself up for an endurance challenge this year, if you've got a distance race you're looking to do quite well in, train in those kind of conditions before the big day. If you're going to be in a race that's got a lot of wash and chop and pleasure craft, Go find somewhere that's like that beforehand and get used to paddling at race pace in those kind of conditions. Use Google Earth, use apps and online satellite imagery to look at the course beforehand so you know what's coming. Look at the weather. What's the weather like at that time of year? Does it get a lot of wind? What kind of direction? Again, that'll help you make informed choices on your tactics, and rather than you reacting to people around you, you can dictate what's going on. And they're really all the sort of things you can add together in terms of reduce drag on your board, reduce the weight on yourself and your equipment, know your event, put that all together, and hopefully that's some really, really simple ways that can improve your racing this year.